Well, 2022 represents New Milford's 100th year of incorporation, and in recognition of the milestone, we're doing a series of interviews. They're basically designed to go back in history, the history of this community, talking to various residents, historians, and basically folks that know this town better than most. And one of those individuals is Josephine Cabildo Appari, who is a two-time member, a current member here in the town of New Milford. And Josephine, first of all, welcome. Thank you very much for doing our interview as we celebrate the incorporation of this great community. And you know, a little bit about your personal history before we talk about the town. And you grew up in the Philippines and came to New York City. How did you find your way to New York City?
Okay, I had an uncle and aunt who were in 136th Street, and my uncle, the brother of my father, who was killed before I was born, had been here since 1924. So it's just following him so that I would have some relatives already. So that was the motivation.
In 1924, so how did the phone call, did you make the phone call and say, you know, I think I want to come to America?
It was a slow mail.
The slow mail, oh, yeah. I get slow mail.
Yeah, because it cost an arm and a leg to do a phone call way back in 67.
So when you say slow mail, the question for me is, how slow was it?
Well, probably it took 2 weeks to send a letter, and then you know, that's what I recall anyway.
Was this a situation that you jumped at and said, was there any hesitation to come to New York at all?
Not at all. Since I was little, I was 5 years old when I verbalized that I would like to become a nurse. I would go to America and settle in New York City.
And that's exactly what happened. For how long did you settle in New York City?
Until from 1967 to when we bought the house on Princeton Street here in Milford, 74.
1974. And what drove you, or how did you get to New Milford? Why New York City to New Milford as opposed to other towns in this area?
Because the realtor who we had then had shown us Bergen County communities, and then she had described that over here there were Filipino immigrants who had come. So I thought it would be easier for me to acclimate to the community when I know people from the Philippines, that there are Filipinos here in town.
So in New Milford, on the south side of town, near Berkeley School?
Near Berkeley School,
near
Princeton
Berkeley,
Street. Mm-hmm.
Right, right. And you worked in the hospital in
the old Bergen Pines County
Bergen
Hospital.
Pines.
I was working at Columbia Presbyterian. My last position there was as a teacher at Edna McConnell Clark School of Nursing, where I taught the practical nursing students and the operating room technician students. So it was a very rich experience for me. But it was Columbia Presbyterian that sponsored me to be able to come here for the third preference immigrant visa that was opened up in 1966, I believe. So I came in 1967. So it was a lot of excitement because, you know, coming to New York City. And the reason I went to Columbia Presbyterian is I saw it in the American Journal of Nursing. I wrote to the director of nursing in their advertisement that I saw, because it was just so beautiful, you know, a garden and the hospital and all that. So then I was able to stay at the Georgian Apartments, which was just crossing the street on 168th Street. So that happened for 2 years that I was there. And meantime, I went to Columbia University teacher's college to further my education because I had a BSN, Baccalaureate of Science in Nursing from the University of the Philippines, and I wanted to go further. So I signed up for the Master in Education at Teachers College, and then I was noticing that my classmates there were there all day, full-time, and I said, how could you do that? Oh, we have a scholarship, the federal traineeship, you know, if you qualify. So I went to the officer and inquired the tuition aid office, and he said, we haven't given to immigrants. And then I posed the question to him. I said, you tell me if American nurses and immigrants like myself from the Philippines pay a different kind of tax rate. And then I would say, you know, I would say if they have a higher tax rate and I have a lower tax rate, then by all means. But then if it's the same tax rate, then I think I'm entitled to apply for a traineeship. So he said, I'm going to Washington, D.C. and post your situation. Lo and behold, he came back, called me up. I was on night duty, so I was asleep when he called, and I was like not paying attention. But when he said that I was approved, I jumped, and right away I went to Teachers College and filled up my application. So I was able to go full-time, just like my classmates, and finish it in 1 year for my MED. So that's like a lesson where you have to advocate for yourself. Do not wait till somebody hands something to you, because that's not how life is.
The differences in this town when you first came here to as you see it today, is there one glowing, you know, difference in this town that you can, or several that you can bring out?
Oh, definitely. Of course, I was so much younger in 74. I was born in 1945, so how old was I? Probably 29, not quite 30 then. And so the kids were in their preschool, then their school, elementary, middle school, high school. You know, they finished here, except my son, who finished his high school at Regis School in Manhattan. That's the Jesuit all-free education for boys, which I was very thrilled about. And that's only through friends that I knew. But it was a hard process. Out of the 8 Filipino boys that went there, he was the only one who was admitted. So I attribute that to God's grace. Yeah. So what is notable is New Milford seemed to be much nicer in terms of infrastructure, like this ball field now with the artificial turf. The difference, though, is ShopRite being moved to much further than my where I am. The library is so close to me because it used to be at the old building where the senior center is or was, because the senior center closed March of 2020 due to COVID. But I think that this town caters to all generations, and I find that very noticeable because I'm a senior now. I'm 76, and when we moved here the second time, I was 72. So it's and then I noticed too that there's more diversity here. Before there were not that many Asians who had moved to this place, but now there are many Asians. I asked my children who had gone through the system, and thank God that they don't remember much of bullying. A couple of times they were called chinks, you know, because they thought they were Chinese, but nothing really. And they had such good programs, curriculum in the elementary and then they got involved in CCD. Ascension Church was, we were part of the parish of Ascension, and there was interdenominational services way back then. I don't see that now. I didn't see it this time. So probably I missed it or what, because when I got born again in 1991 at the Billy Graham Crusade, the person who prayed over me was Joan Paulis. She just died 2 years ago, who is from Ascension Church. So how do you see that? As is that by chance? I think it's divine intervention, if you ask me. Yeah.
Now when your children growing up over by Berkeley, they walked to Berkeley.
Yes.
Right? Now at that time, did they have to walk to the high school or the middle school, or how?
The middle school, I took them. So
took them.
there was a time when for 7 years I had to stay on nights to be able to juggle, the child care, the picking them up, taking them. They had lots of activities. I remember on Saturdays, what they called Saturday Fun Shop. I don't know if that still exists, but that's where they get exposed to other than the academic,
Really? So the high school was always open on Saturdays?
That was at the middle school.
The middle school was open.
They had
on Saturdays?
those special, I don't know if that was through a grant. I can't remember. But we had to pay some nominal fee. But it was good to expose the kids to the other children, doing arts and crafts. They would do some, that was the start too of the technological age. I thought we didn't have a computer, but they were exposed to computer, that type of thing.
How about that? That in high school they didn't school buses. They didn't have that many. It's not like today.
Yeah.
So they would walk
sometimes
to the
the
high school.
neighborhood.
If you didn't drop them off, they would walk to the high school.
We had some kind in the block of a carpooling.
Oh, okay.
So that the next door neighbor who has children too, we took turns. So it's the neighborhood that helped one another. And talking about neighborhood, I have to applaud my neighbors too. One from Irish descent. The other one is from South American descent. And then I found a Filipino family just across me. And so the neighborhood here, friendly and diversity.
And you left New Milford to go to Paramus, and that basically your family strategy, how about that for a term there, was to be closer to Bergen Pines. Is that correct?
Not really. We needed more space because the family grew, and I had a brother. My husband had a niece who came from the Philippines, and the housing wasn't enough from Princeton Street.
Okay.
So we had to move to a 6-bedroom house, 4.5 baths. But a few years after that, we had to move again because this time we downsized. There were just the two of us left.
And you decided to come right back here. There
was
no hesitation.
Not
right?
directly. No. We had a hiatus of 2 years because we couldn't find the house that we wanted when we were looking around. So we rented like a condo place near the Bergen County Administration building in Hackensack. So 2 years, and then we restarted looking again, and we ended up in 215 Rambler. So I'm happy about that.
Yeah, and so you come back here, and was it hard to come back? Sometimes there's that old phrase, and I guess life is all about phrases and things like that. You said sometimes they say you can always go back home, and then there's the other one that says it's tough to go back home and retrace the steps. In your situation, which one was it?
Well, I just had so much trust because in 1991 I became a born-again Christian at the Billy Graham Crusade, as I mentioned earlier. And so I just trusted God that, wherever He puts us is where we belong. And as I said, I'm glad that we came back to New Milford. And some of the parents that I knew before were still here. So it made me feel at home again. And the center, I registered right away. And sure enough, I saw some retired nurses there that I knew. So it was like fitting in so fast.
People in New Milford, you mentioned, the residents and neighbors, you always had good relationships over on Princeton Street. And but were there certain people or memorable experiences that you had that were unique to this town?
In terms of unique, I know that there are some historical spots here because I saw, I think in Demarest, a house being taken out and being moved to another place. That was like a historical building of some kind. And what's unique here is the kids grew up, I would say, in a very healthy atmosphere. We had very good teachers, and they interacted with students so well that they also have after-school programs that my kids were involved in. And that to me, it just was very enriching and helped to develop the kids, socially, emotionally, and academically,
But the bottom line is this: you were happy here. You made the right decision coming from New York, and you made the right decision coming from Hackensack to come back, and your memories, your experiences here in this town have been very good and very positive, right?
Very, very positive. I would advertise New Milford to friends who are looking for a place to move to.
Well, thank you very much for being part of the celebration, the 100th year of incorporation in 2022, and thank you very much.
Thank you, John.
And those are the words of Josephine Cabildo Appari, longtime resident, two-time resident here in the borough of New Milford. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.